Hello, welcome to our Sunday school lesson for December 31st, 2023. Tomorrow's supposed to be 2024. And of course, I'm recording this a little bit earlier because I'm scheduled to be away this day. And Brother Jim Evans is scheduled to be at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and you pray for him. And I'm sure he'll do a wonderful job and be a blessing not only to Mount Calvary, but to all he comes across. Nevertheless, we're looking today at David and Bathsheba, the last lesson for this year, but it's in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Now, the study guide covers verses 1 through 5 and verses 14 and 15, but really the study guide covers the whole lesson, just focuses in on those verses. And so we'll follow the study guide at least a little bit. And maybe I'll say some things that are not said in the study guide. Beginning verses 1 and 2, Conceiving the Sin is titled this section. It says, "And it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David tarried still at Jerusalem." And I'm going to pause right there because there's a little bit of change here. Now, David was not with his men of war. And some folks get on David really harshly here. I'm not going to get on him really harshly, but I will point out that it says at the time that kings go to war. So this phrase lets me know that David probably should have been with his men. That's what I'm thinking from this particular phrase. Now, why wasn't he with his men? There might have been a good reason. Maybe he sprained his ankle, or maybe something else was going on. Maybe he had the flu. I just don't know. But from this phrase, it does seem like to me he should have been with his men. Apparently, he was maybe mid-40s to about 50, and maybe he was slowing down in his physical age, but he didn't necessarily have to be in the front lines of the battle. But apparently he should have been with his men. Now, we should always remember that when we're not where we should be, where we are supposed to be, it does open us up to problems in sin. A big door to sin is boredom. Now, there is a time for us to be still and to be quiet. It is in my opinion, that's a very, very difficult time. I would rather be doing something else, but than being still and being quiet. But when I do get still and get quiet, and I really can only think of one time when that happened. But when I do, it is a blessing. But boy, it's hard to. It's hard to get there, but this is not the time for David. Apparently it's when the kings went to battle. And so apparently he should have been with his men, and he wasn't. And so we know it's opening the door for sin. But I will caution you. The old saying is, are you busy? And somebody say, "Oh, I'm busy all the time." So good, it keeps you out of trouble. But sin can enter the door, if you will, even when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So don't think that just because you're busy, maybe busy going to church, maybe studying your lessons for Sunday school, maybe preparing a sermon if you're a preacher, Satan can attack, and our sin nature longs for sin. And so be careful. Don't just be busy for the sake of busyness, because sin can still be an issue and will be an issue. But as many people say, when you're in a place of boredom or not where you're supposed to be, we tend to look for something to do. And in sin, oftentimes, that's when it can really creep in, is when we're not where we're supposed to be. And so we find David here. He sees this woman across the way, Bathsheba. We know her name. We'll just skip ahead to naming her. But it came to pass in verse 2, "In an evening tide, that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. So he saw Bathsheba, and to see her over there, I won't say was a sin. Sometimes we see things we're not supposed to see, and what do? Well, an old saying is bounce those eyes, bounce them off to another place, and see something else. Look towards something else. Run to God when you're exposed to sin. And I remember some years ago I was on his Fox News website, and popped up a commercial, pop-up ad, and it was not nice. It wasn't totally vulgar, but it was not nice. And I went home frustrated, reported that to my wife. I said, I can't believe I was just checking out the headlines, and here it is. And the internet does that all the time. Even Brother Philip Miller talks about something happening even worse than that, in how he had to turn those eyes. In essence, those are not his words exactly, but we need to be careful. We need to be careful when those things happen. Hey, get out of there, go someplace else. And David didn't do that. David was rather desiring of this other woman who was not his wife. But now, here's where David is coming from, though. David was wrong in his multiple marriages. He had too many wives. That was wrong. He was already doing that type stuff. So he might have been thinking, oh, there's a beautiful woman over there. That's another wife for me. So maybe that's what he was thinking. That was wrong still. He was looking to commit adultery. Of course, we know from this instance, when David confesses this before God later, he says, I've sinned against you and you alone. So all sin's against God. But to look towards another man, he's committing adultery, if you will, against his wife and other wives. And so no matter what the situation is with Bathsheba, she's already married and that stuff, we're not there just yet. He's already looking to commit adultery with this woman based on his relationship. He's already married. He shouldn't be doing this already. But hey, there's more to come. Verses 3 through 5, entitled Committing the Sin in this section. In verse 3, and David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned unto her house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I am with child. So first off, in verse 3, we see David went, if you will, further in this lust towards Bathsheba and his adultery. Now already we mentioned he's married, and so this is adultery already. But now he's found out that this is Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. And so not only is he married, but she is married. And this is another man's wife. And this is, if you will, twofold adultery. I don't think that's a biblical term, okay? I'm just trying to illustrate a little bit here. He's already committing adultery because he's married, and here is a woman who is married as well. So, if you will, on both sides of the equation of these two people, they are married, therefore adultery. Twofold, if you will. This is not his wife. She is the wife of another man. But then I'll mention this here as well. We have Eliam mentioned here, the daddy of Bathsheba. Listen, when you disrespect a man's daughter, you disrespect the man, the father of the daughter. Don't do that. I've got a daughter. I know. I don't want anybody to do that. When you disrespect somebody's children, you're disrespecting their father as well. Now, when we go a little bit further, and we've already mentioned that David will confess before God, against you and you alone have I sinned. And Paul on Mars Hill, he says that the Lord is our Father in creation. He's the one who created us. And therefore, when you sin against somebody else, you are sinning against their creator, God. And so that's why David would say later, against you and you alone have I sinned. Not that to the exclusion of the suffering of all these people we'll talk about today, but all these people we'll talk about today are created by God. Therefore, we're sinning against God. And how much more if those folks are children of God, spiritually speaking? Well, nevertheless, he will, if you will, he went a little bit further and in this adulterous affair. And at this point, at verse 3, David hears news. This woman's married to Uriah the Hittite. Not just any old dude. He's not a scumbag at all. He's a mighty warrior for you, David. And David has some choices, and he could have choose to stop in his sin. Just stop. Now, this would have been a better route, wouldn't it? Yes, it would have been better. But even better, if you will, a better route is to stop in the sin and accompany this stopping, if I can say these things. Those of you who have the notes, you can just read it. Stop the sin, and with that, run to God in repentance and say, Lord, I have sinned. I need your help, because the only one who can deal with sin is God. And that's a better route to go, is to stop in the sin, repent, and go from there. What would have happened if David would have stopped right here? Uriah the Hittite would have lived. Bathsheba would have been married to Uriah. They might have had 42 children. I don't know. And then all the other men later that are with Uriah who get killed, they wouldn't have been killed. And Joab wouldn't have been in the midst of the conspiracy to kill. So, boy, it sure would have been good if you stopped it before you went any further. And if you find yourself in sin, stop where you are. If you're at the beginning, stop. That's good to stop. It's better to stop before it starts if you can, but stop, and then run to God. And for he is the help when it comes to victory over sin. However, what did David choose? He chose to fulfill the lust of his flesh. Now, this is something you need to remember. We are a threefold creation, if you will. We have a body, a flesh. We have soul, we have spirit. The flesh will lie to you. It'll tell you the truth as well, but it will also lie. I use this example all the time for people. That my body will tell me sometimes I'm hungry. 3 times in my life it's told me that. Very rarely am I really hungry. But it'll tell me that I'm hungry. And so I'll go and get something to eat. And then my body will say, oh yeah, you need to eat some more of that. And my saying is, I don't eat one Little Debbie, I eat a box of Little Debbie. So I have to do things to not listen to my body when it's lying to me that I need to get more and more and more. There's a time for feasting, yeah, but not for gluttony. And so that's something that I have to deal with and make sure that I don't go that route. Don't give in to that flesh. Here his flesh is saying, oh, this will be good. Well, you'll get another wife, or you'll satisfy the burning of your desires towards this woman. And nobody will know. Nobody will know. You're the king. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. But no, it didn't turn out to be okay. And so David did sin. And at the end of this passage here, David's sin is about to find him out. For Bathsheba is with child. Now, the next passage in the study guide looks at verses 14 and 15, but I think it really starts here in verse 6 and goes through 15. David's covering up the sin. In verse 6, it says, And David sent to Joab, saying, Send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah was coming to him, David demanded of him how Joab did and how the people did and how the war prospered. And David said to Uriah, Go down to thy house and wash thy feet. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a bunch of meat. It's what followed him from the king. So he gave him a bunch of good food to eat. And so David decided, well, I'm going to cover up my sin and I'm going to pretend like this is a good thing that I'm doing. Send Uriah here. He's one of my mighty men. Send him back here. Uriah, how are things going? How's things with my men? I love them so much. Not enough to be with them, but I love them so much. And how's things going with Joab? And is the battle going okay? Do you think that siege is going to work all right? Oh, Uriah, thank you for coming, reporting to me, and you know what? Just go on home. Here's a bunch of good meat to eat. We got ribeyes and lamb chops, and just have a good evening before you go back to the battlefield. Thank you for coming and informing me. I'm such a caring, loving king. Oh, David was just going to look good. Something bad happened, he was going to look good. I might be getting on him a lot, aren't I? Not really. Getting on our sinful condition because we lie to ourselves, think we can get out of things. Oh, it happens to me, it happens to you, it happens to everybody. And David is given to us as an example. Watch out. You'll try to cover your tracks and try to make yourself look good, but stink stinks no matter how you paint it. It looks bad. All right, I'll keep on going. I'm not going to edit that out, but hey, go on here. And so he's trying to look good, and we pick up in verse 9. David sent him home, but Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and went not down to his house. And when they had told David, saying, Uriah went not down into his house, David said unto Uriah, came thou not from thy journey? And then did you not go down into your house? And Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord, the army, they're encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As thou livest, and as thy soul lives, I will not do this thing. So Joab, he didn't want to do this. He didn't want to forsake his men by going home and taking care of these things. And so David appeared like he was doing something good, but Uriah said, now listen, I'm concerned about the ark and the people of Israel. I'm concerned about Joab. I'm concerned about the men in the battlefield. And in essence, he said, I wouldn't enjoy myself at all. I need to be with them. They're not with their families, and so I need to be with them. And so he was one of those guys who cared about the people. And no doubt he cared about Bathsheba too, but he cared about his responsibility. And so what did that mean? Well, that meant that David was going to have to conspire again. He was going to have to cover up his sin. Now, we need to always be careful to always consider our position with God first. Only the Lord can truly deal with the things that we're going through. Only the Lord can deal with sin, and David should have ran to the Lord, but he didn't do this. And now, as we talk about dealing with sin, I'll just mention this. The only one who can really deal with sin is the Lord, and it's proven in the cross of Jesus Christ. Now, nobody else could have paid the sin debt for you, for me, for the whole world of all time, all sins ever committed, except for the eternal Son of God, Jesus Christ. So he humbled himself and he went to the cross and he conquered all of our sin, making a show openly that he conquered our sin. He cried out, "It's finished," on the cross. And that's when the debt was paid. And listen, he finished the sin debt so thoroughly that the wages of sin, death, could not hold him. And if Jesus can conquer our sin on the cross of Calvary so that we can stand before God, as the Hebrew writer says in prayer, we can come boldly to the throne of God, not because of who you are, but because of who Jesus is. And if he can conquer our sin on the cross so that we might approach our Creator God, who's far holier than we can conceive, can he not conquer adultery? Can he not conquer the sin that you're dealing with? He can. But David didn't run to God. Instead, he conspired to cover it up. And so he was going to conspire some more. And David was hoping, apparently, that Uriah would go to the house and think that the child would be his, and Uriah wasn't going to have that. He was concerned with the people of Israel and with the army of Israel out in the battlefield, his men that he should be with, if you will. And so David had to deceive again. And the next thing that we find is David got him drunk. And so then verse 12, it says, "And David said to Uriah, tarry here today also, and tomorrow I will let you depart. So Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and the morrow. And when David had called him, he did eat and drink before him, and he made him drunk. And at evening he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord, but went not down to his house." And apparently, it doesn't say it exactly, but apparently David's plan B was, well, I'll get you drunk and you'll forget your commitment. It's another lie is what it is. And Uriah, he was still committed. And so David's plans, well, I'll get Uriah here. He'll think he'll go home. He'll be with his wife, and he'll think this child is his. And Uriah's a good man who loves the people of Israel and the men in his army, and he won't do that. And so David said, well, I'm going to get him drunk, and apparently so that he might fulfill the plan that David had to start with, but Uriah wouldn't do it. And so David had to deceive again to try and cover up his sin. And what he was going to do now is murder. And so then in verse 14, it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. So this is what David's decided to do. He's decided to murder Uriah the Hittite. Now, not by his own hand, but it is a conspiracy to murder Uriah. And we see the effects of David's sin on others. In verses 16 through 25, it says, and it came to pass, when Joab observed the city, that he assigned Uriah unto a place where he knew the valiant men were. And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab, and there fell some of the people of the servants of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, when you have made an end of telling the matters of the war unto the king, and if so be that the king's wrath arise, and he say unto thee, wherefore approached ye so nigh unto the city, that when ye did fight, know ye not that they who would shoot from the wall, who smote Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal, did not a woman cast a piece of a millstone upon him from the wall, that he died in Thebez? Why went ye nigh to the wall? Then thou shalt say, thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So the messenger went and came and showed David all that Joab had sent for him. And the messenger said unto David, surely the men prevailed against us, and came out unto us into the field, and we were upon them even unto the entering of the gate. And the shooters shot from off the wall unto the servants, and some of the king's servants be dead, and thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then David said unto the messenger, thus shalt thou say unto Joab, let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devours one as well as the other. Make thy battle more strong against the city, and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, she mourned for her husband. And then when the mourning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife and bare him a son. And I'll save the last sentence for last. That makes sense. All right. Now, here's what happened. David's trying to cover up his sin, and now he's going to involve a whole bunch of people. He involves Joab in this conspiracy to murder Uriah. I'm not going to speak much about Joab, but Joab should have said, hey, this ain't right. And then David jeopardized the army of Israel. At least this action would expose them to the possibility of a greater defeat than what they suffered, a defeat on purpose. And then during this defeat in this skirmish, many other men were killed by this bad military action, and is all to kill Uriah. And also we find that Bathsheba and I would say the rest of the family of Uriah the Hittite, they suffered loss. Uriah died. A loved one. How many of you have lost a loved one? It's not good. And not only Uriah, but all the other families of these other men, they suffered loss. And David said, well, folks are going to die in battle. And it is true, folks are going to die in battle, but that doesn't mean it's good. I'm going to share with you one of my pet peeves. When battles are happening across the world or wars are happening across the world, people will say, civilians died, it's bad. But it's as if someone who is in the military, when they die, it's not as bad. It's bad. Death is bad, military or civilian. It's bad. Doesn't matter. And this is bad. Especially it's bad because David wanted it to happen. Their own king, their own leader, because he's trying to cover himself up. And so then he thought he had it made. After she mourned, in verse 27, he fetched her, and she became his wife, and everything was good, covered up. Oh wait, last sentence. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. It wasn't covered up. Sin is never covered up. That's why you have to bring it to the Lord. Because the Lord does have the power to cover our sin so that we stand before him justified. Not because we have done anything great, but because of Jesus. And as a child of God, when you battle sin, what is it, Romans chapter 7, where Paul says, I do those things I don't want to do, and the things I want to do, I don't do those. It's a battle. Run to God, run to God, run to God. Stop and run to God. What would have happened if David had stopped? I would say that we probably wouldn't read this chapter. But David didn't stop. He kept on with his sin and then made it worse and worse. The only one who can overcome sin is the Lord. Now, before I dismiss this lesson, I will say this. Some people question the authenticity, oh, got it said, of the Word of God. This is one reason why we know the Word of God is true, because God paints a picture of even the ugly parts. We have David, the king of Israel. The tendency of men would not be to cover this part, but to only cover the good. But God covers the bad as well. The reason is we need to know the results of sin in our lives. We need to know that no one is perfect and sinless except for Jesus. In fact of the matter is, just about every biblical character in the Old Testament and New Testament of any written about very much, I'll say it that way. I was going to say of any value, but every character of great value, even those not recorded in the Bible. But those recorded in the Bible who's written about very much, you see the ugly, except for the only exception I can think of is Joseph. And of course, Jesus himself and everything he did was perfect and righteous. And he knows how to deal with sin. He fought it. He was tempted in all points like we are, yet without sin. Therefore, we can come boldly to the throne of Christ, our throne of grace, by the power of Jesus, our Savior. All right. Well, may the Lord bless and keep you. Need to get this online because Jesus could be back before the end of 2023, and I'm going if he is.